If the robe fits, I suppose you should wear it. Certain dramatic events transpired in the 10th and final episode of Foundation Season 3. From its beginning, this series has centered on the fall of the Cleonic genetic dynasty. Psychohistory's predictions assured us this was an inevitability, so it's never been a question of if it would end, but rather when. The bigger question for the characters, and for us, the viewers, was what would come after. The finale of the 3rd season answered this question, and I don't think many people saw it coming. Even if the Mule hadn't shown up, the Foundation's function was to shorten the dark period and prevent the galaxy from slipping into 30,000 years of barbarism. In a remarkably satisfying twist, Brother Darkness decided to lean into his new title while serving up a healthy portion of barbarity on the side. He was not conciliating, and the reveal of his true nature is another example of a theme the show has returned to time and again this season. People not turning out to be who you thought they were. Nowhere is that more glaringly apparent than in the confirmation that Pilou Asbæk's character was not the real Mule. This is something book readers like myself were expecting, but the joke was on us, as show-only viewers were in a better position to interpret the clues the show was presenting because it decided to go in a different direction. As for how the reveal that Beta is the Mule played out, I think it works. The number of people who embrace this theory in the back half of the season indicates that the signs were there, which is a positive. As a new character, I think Beta was one of the stronger additions to this season's lineup, and the creators did the necessary work to make her compelling enough to carry the shift of focus. I guess where I run into issues with making her the Mule is that I really liked how her story played out in the books, and that can't work in the same way now. They could switch that over to a different character, and this could potentially add a layer, but discussing that would involve book spoilers. Additionally, the swerve makes it hard to take this outcome at face value, and there's a diminishing return on twists. I don't know how many times they can show us an edited version of the Rossum flashback before it starts to lose its meaning. Of course, Darkness taking center stage and center throne, or I guess the only throne now, turns up the uncertainty more than it resolves anything, which tracks with what I said in my episode 9 video. While many would agree this is the show's strongest overall season to date, the finale feels more like a to be continued than a conclusion. Still, we saw the brutal loss of some major characters. There's a moment in the scene where Brother Day goes to Demerzel in her room, where she calls him to rest his head on her lap like he did when he was a child. He's coming back from a transformational experience, and she's starting to notice changes in how she thinks. Both performances convey this without the character saying a word. This is preceded by 24 looking at his reflection in her mirror before he engages with her, which I think is an endearing touch that really illuminates the journey we've gone on with these actors and characters for the last 3 seasons. Visually, this is a class before they lock fingers. It's a scene about connection and change that features a nearly immortal robot and the 24th exponent of a line of clones who, based on their circumstances, shouldn't be capable of either thing. His resting his head on her lap brings to mind his memory of doing the same thing when he was young, heartbroken that the genetic drift made him doubt that he could make her happy. In another memory, he asked her about her time as a prisoner. While this evokes her first meeting with Cleon at that age in the cell below the palace, it's also a reminder that she's never truly been freed. This Cleon, whom she raised to be the same and to resist the inevitable changes, appeared to be the one who would make that happen. But in a less satisfying development than Brother Darkness's ascension to the single throne, rather than the ascension that ends up with him as a pile of ash, we end up saying goodbye to the characters instead. Is it really goodbye? In the case of natural clones that would produce Brother Days as we've known them, I think the answer is yes. 24 seems like a good one to go out on, offering a glimpse of what might be possible if things were different. In a story that appears to have far more robots than we were initially led to believe, the return of some version of Demerzel seems more likely. Plus, a good portion of this version's skull still exists. The big confirmation is that she's not the last of her kind. And even though he thinks so, neither is Brother Darkness. Brother Dawn is still out there. So 23's claim as the final clone of Cleon I will certainly be contested, even if on paper this doesn't look like much of a matchup, with Dawn immobilized by his leg injury and in the Mule's custody, while Darkness is sitting on a black hole bomb. Dawn 25's story provided a lot of the intrigue and most exciting moments in the first half of the season. After Gaal misled him into forcing an enclosure she didn't want to succeed, he was MIA for a stretch and then spent the rest of the season holed up with the apparent real Mule, although he had no idea about that when we last saw him. In the beginning, it served to reinforce how the clones were still somewhat predictable because of their source, even though they weren't exact copies anymore due to the genetic drift. Gaal exploited their tendency to look for an escape hatch at that time in their lives, something we saw other Dawns do in the first 2 seasons. Brother Day's absence during his time on the center throne gave 25 the sense that he could step up and be consequential, making him an easy mark for Gaal's manipulation and eventual betrayal. He's one of the few remaining threads connected to the dynasty, but it looks like he'll be the Mule's captive at the beginning of season 4. He doesn't appear to hold much value as a hostage in the current state of affairs either. It all sets him up to end the season in a place where it's hard to say where his story will go from here. I mentioned Gaal's betrayal, and throughout the season we saw her do things that led to real-world consequences. Tough decisions were made for generally the right reasons that required sacrifice, and lives were lost in the pursuit of a perceived strategic advantage. After he set up the second foundation while she slept to prepare for her confrontation with the Mule, the Harry who got a body from Calais on Una's world died, becoming the latest in the long line of people she'd lost since the beginning of the series. Early in the finale, she explains that when she was nervous, she used to count primes, and that it wasn't just a coping mechanism, but that she was building a fortress inside her mind. Her parents, Salvor, her daughter, her mentor, Harry Seldon, her lover, Rach, all the people she lost form the walls of this place. Their memories are her shield for the inevitable fight with the Mule, which she says won't happen on a battlefield but inside her mind where she can be in control. Things pretty much go according to plan. After securing the use of the unique properties of the 4-dimensional vault to bypass the Mule's lockdown of Foundation Station, she tracks him down to Inber's old office. He's just basically hanging out there with little breadroll waiting for them to arrive, while Gaal and her team of Torin, Ebling, Magnifico, and the Second Foundationers advance their way through the station. Her lover Pritch, who she shared a warm, almost steamy goodbye with, split off to search for Beta after a pregame conversation with Torin. She heard the sirens with Dawn and realized she could leave their now unguarded room. Dawn's injuries prevent him from joining Beta, so they say their goodbyes while he's left there alone. When Han finds her, he's overwhelmed by the Mule's power and ends up converted. Everything else in this part of the story seems less consequential, since it has all been leading to the one-on-one showdown between the two Mentalics. Torin acts like a tough guy worried about the love of his life. Ebling helps to figure out a way into the office. Maggie cowers, and one of the Second Foundationers promptly gets shot in the face as soon as they get inside. The Mule initially appears to get the upper hand, physically overpowering Gaal and searching through her mind for the location of the Second Foundation. Inside her fortress, she turns the tables, pointing out that he forces people to love him. She's seen his memories, so she knows it'll never be enough, because no matter how many people he converts, he's still the kid on Rossum wondering why his parents love that baby more than him. His reaction to that gives her an opening that she uses to slit his throat with Rach's knife. This reinforces the idea that the probable future she sees can be changed. Through training, her mentalic abilities are even enough to overcome an outlier like the Mule who could potentially negate psychohistory's predictions. The problem is that it quickly becomes clear that this pirate she's been dreaming of for so long isn't the Mule at all. The childhood memory he told Harry about wasn't his. It was implanted. And he never seemed to fully understand his situation. There was the scene when they took the jump gate where he mentioned feeling like his life had been overtaken by a Holy Spirit, but otherwise he didn't appear to know he was a simple puppet. As they're trying to figure out what happened, Beta comes in and announces that she's the Mule, which, as I mentioned earlier, more or less works. She recognizes that it's a lot to take in, and her new convert Pritchard tries to help smooth things over. This makes for a complicated situation for Gaal, which gets much worse when he shoots her when she tries to attack Beta. He tries to reason that the Mule can do in a year what psychohistory couldn't do in hundreds. And he does the whole, I'm still thinking for myself, but oh yeah, I've never felt so much love thing. A detail that stood out to me is that she comforts Torin and says that she'll explain everything, but she doesn't convert him. She does try to convert Gaal, but everything goes wrong when she has Magnifico play to amplify her powers, and Gaal reveals that they tampered with the balladeer. In the end, his off-key tune helps Gaal get away. What's more interesting here is where this leaves the character. I've touched on her making tough decisions and the surprising betrayal of Dawn. She's on the receiving end of it this time with Han's turn, and she's not only lost this person she was intimate with, maybe the person that she's closest with, but she lost the thing that's been her primary focus for years. Something that served as a wedge for them in their relationship. The Mule isn't gone, but the confrontation she'd been preparing for is. On the betrayal front, Vault Harry pops in on the beggar to cash in on that new body Gaal promised him. Life in the vault is not living. It feels more like his tomb, and the show has been planting seeds to indicate how disgruntled he's been becoming with this service position he's found himself locked into. Maybe not forever, but at least for a very long time, and he's not really feeling it. His being a digital copy of Harry makes things interesting. We have some information about who he was, and we know about his vision. Did Harry the architect anticipate this? Is this something he expected to happen? He certainly made sacrifices in his effort to develop psychohistory, including the big one. Still, is this something he would expect a version of himself to be okay with? In the best case scenario, he wouldn't have found out he was the left hand, which honestly doesn't seem like something any version of Harry would abide without protest. But in a story that explores free will and determinism and has so many situations where people are forced to do things, whether by directives or mentalics, should this version of Harry be okay with serving out his sentence? He's not. For a guy who traffics in predictions, the original Harry might have seen this coming. I'm sure we'll get a better sense if that was the case next season. But the key thing now is that Vault Harry makes his plea for freedom, reserving himself to begging if necessary, and Gaal can't give him what he wants. More than that, she knew going in that she wouldn't be able to. And you could split hairs on whether she flat out lied or just let him believe what he wanted to, but the result is the same. Saying I'm sorry isn't going to fix things, and in pursuit of the greater good, Gaal may have created a formidable enemy for herself. I found it funny that since it's Harry who is a character that has flaws we're familiar with, I found myself wondering about how he came in and said that he was sorry. He tried to warn Gaal that it was her, referring to Beta. Because that's not what he said. He said the Mule story didn't add up. So I wasn't sure if this was a way to show his time in the tomb has made him a little worse than the original on some level. Especially on rewatch, this just came off as a pathetic attempt to make it sound like he had things figured out when he didn't. Either way, Salty Harry is on his way back to the vault, and Gaal is off to parts unknown. While the show's dive bombing your way through atmosphere action beats tend to lose me, Lou Llobell and Jared Harris anchored this sequence, keeping me firmly in my seat through the powerful, unspoken parts of their performances. Also, Roxanne Dawson, who has become their go-to for the series' big episodes, directed the darkness, and the shot of Harry remaining in place as the ship jumps away was just such an effective way to end things. Not only does it look great, but it also illustrates his isolation, and perhaps more importantly, his volatility. And on the note of Gaal's tough decisions, it's worth highlighting that she made no effort to rescue her team or even brother Dawn. While perhaps unsurprising given the nature of her escape, this omission firmly places everyone left on the station within the Mule's orbit for Season 4. I don't expect the Mule's objective to find the Second Foundation to change, and having Harry Seldon's self-proclaimed biographer, Ebling Miz, could be helpful. Han already proved he's worthy to be on her team, and as I've already touched on, I think Torin's connection to Beta makes him a lot more interesting going forward. Brother Dawn is a wild card, the First Foundation is pretty much in shambles, and Vault Harry, now likely regretting handing over the Radiant to Demerzel, will almost certainly be looking for payback. Gaal's next destination is an open question. After being led there by Demerzel and given Calais' ninth proof of folding as her ticket for admission, Ambassador Quent confirmed that the Second Foundation is hiding in the Imperial Library on Trantor. Gaal told the first speaker, Preem Pulver, to go somewhere no one would think to look for them, even Pritch, and this seems like a good choice based on the story we heard Demerzel tell Calais about it. Is Gaal in the dark too? I don't think we can answer that question yet, which is fine. The showdown she's been dreaming of has come to pass, but her primary directive is still to confront and defeat the Mule. Wherever she goes, that's what she'll be setting out to do. When we look back at the very beginning of Foundation, specifically Hari Seldon's trial on Trantor, the concept of the darkness was established as the inevitable fate of the Empire. Gaal saw it, Hari promised to shorten it, and they even used it as a leverage point to save their lives and the Foundation when they were brought before Brother Day, who was Cleon the 12th at the time. Think back to those moments. Gaal, looking into the Prime Radiant, described it by saying, "I could see the darkness. It took my breath away at first. It was crushing." Hari, pitching his plan for the Encyclopedia Galactica, had his claim that his plan can reduce the coming darkness called into question by Ebling Miss's ancestor, Prosecutor Xylus. And in that tense exchange with Brother Day, they warned that only Hari can shorten the darkness. Kill him and you kill hope. For 3 seasons, this darkness felt like an abstract, inevitable decline. But the season 3 finale shatters the abstraction, delivering a brutal and deeply personal end to the Cleonic dynasty. Brother Darkness doesn't just fulfill a prophecy. He becomes the embodiment of that foreshadowed barbarity, making a shocking choice that no one, not even psychohistory, seemed to explicitly predict. It's a twist that redefines the darkness we've been anticipating and brings with it some of those difficult character goodbyes I touched on earlier. The finale opens with Brother Dusk, Cleon the 23rd, in a moment of reflection, overlooking the Imperial grounds from the balcony on his last day of existence. The artist, previously known as the Conciliator, appears to be resigned to his fate. He might be alone, but hell, he had a good run, and what an exclamation mark the Novacula turned out to be. There's no dialogue, so this all comes through the performance and visual clues. He goes to the Principium to see the clones, something we saw the first Brother Darkness we met do back in season 1, and then he goes to get fitted for his royal robe that he'll wear during the ceremony that features his ritual murder. The clock is ticking, her name is Demerzel, and she's known for her precision. Perhaps this is a fact that helps soften the Shadow Master Zagreus up when he suggests that he's old enough to walk down the hall by himself. He's supposed to have his nanites removed next, but when he deliberately avoids that appointment, that's when things truly begin to shift. Early in the season, there was a question of whether he'd be one of the Cleons who run, referring to the exponents who tried to get away when it was time to be vaporized. There was also the question of whether his successor, the current Brother Day, who earned the more affectionate moniker Brother Dude, was the one person who was taking the right approach to the coming end of civilization by embracing the void in Song's company while partaking in the spores. Based on how the finale plays out, the answer to the first is a resounding no, and the second doesn't turn out to matter since it made 23 loathe his brother and his stable of animals so much that it doomed him. Terrence Mann has always been solid in the little they give him to do, and there were times during this season when I wondered if he wasn't overdoing it a bit in some of the scenes. That's not to say the performance was bad, but it felt like there was something extra there that I didn't really understand. And I have to say that it all makes sense now and helps make this his MVP performance. It hits its peak when he returns to the clone chamber to set his plan in motion, singing the whole time, and it's incredibly fun to watch play out from there. Blowing up the clone tanks almost feels like a nihilistic act, a defiant, if I can't continue, why should any of these guys get to live? And honestly, I didn't fully grasp his true calculated plan until I saw it unfold. He destroys all the remaining clones, including the ones in the tower that we just saw for the first time, and those provide a great moment when the flesh that is inside the tank starts to come down to the lower level later, and he drains the future Brother Dawn's tank and takes him with him to the Ascension Chamber. He understands Demerzel's directive and knows that she won't let him live past his expiration date. So he places the baby under the beam and activates it, knowing Demerzel won't have any choice but to sacrifice herself to try and save the dynasty. I don't think there's a way to describe the mix of horror and satisfaction I felt watching him destroy my favorite character in the series. I've often commented on how Demerzel's story is defined by internal conflict, and that's precisely where I was watching this scene. To loop back a bit to talk about how she got to this end, which is another example of things that raise more questions than they answer, Brother Day's dramatic turn appeared to be on the brink of providing the ending of her service that it felt like the show was foreshadowing. I discussed his return and their improvised clasp, and she's genuinely shocked to see the brazen head. Of course, she can't clasp with that because she says it will undo Cleon the First's programming, but there's a moment where Day navigates around her, directly violating her directive to help him figure out how to activate the skull. The performances throughout are what you've come to expect from Byrne and Pace, so that every scene they share lands with maximum impact. But 23 is one step ahead, and nothing can stop him from bringing the darkness. Demerzel dies following her directive, so it's as fitting as it is tragic, and Cleon's cynical use of her programming to achieve his ends is another one of those if the robe fits moments. He recovers the Radiant, saying, "Stronger stuff than even Lady Demerzel. That's something." I don't want to just gloss over this ending, but as I've said, I don't think this is the last time we'll see Lara Byrne, and her skull is still there, and we've seen that's enough in relation to the brazen head. I believe the implication this season has been that Harry gave her the logic bomb in the form of the Prime Radiant, which either started or accelerated what Zephyr Virellus brought up in the garden, that some of her actions look like attempts to circumvent her programming using loopholes. She wasn't able to find an effective way to bypass what she was compelled to do, or even acknowledge that she'd consider it. If you think about her conversations with Dusk and Day over the last 2 episodes, and particularly her helping Day while he helped her skirt the rules, I believe that contains everything we need to know about where she was at the end. I'll have to get into that more when I update my Demerzel video. He's not wrong, and he dispatches Brother Day more unceremoniously, although the scene's not lacking in dramatic effect. Shedding his nanites to escape Demerzel's watchful eye so he could chase after Song and Mycogen ends up being his downfall. The transformation he experienced there wasn't enough to save him or set her free, and I don't think there's a better way to describe what happened other than it was a fascinating journey with a sad ending for a character that I don't think we'll see again. Brother Darkness is not wrong about the resilience of the Radiant. He may believe that his recovering it will give him an advantage against the Mule. Well, that and the Navacula, I guess. But he doesn't have insight into 24's last act. Because even as Demerzel has been reduced to a puddle and Day will eventually have his body removed by the palace staff, as is usually the case with the ending to a Foundation season, the third has a coda that plants the seeds for a new beginning, or at least a furthering of the mystery that is Calais. As Darkness has the additional thrones removed in what's left of the remains of a crumbling galactic empire, which, make no mistake, is still under threat from the Mule, he sends Zagreus away to get things in motion for the transition to his absolute rule. Part of that is dealing with 24's remains, which are still where he fell in the throne room. And as we follow the Shadow Master out, we're taken back to Demerzel's room and the object that delivered hope and despair in equal parts, the robot's skull, which is now activating. Its eyes light up, we hear handshake signal received and negotiated, initiating clasp. This unexpected signal cuts through the galactic silence, reaching far beyond Trantor to a hidden sanctuary on the moon. Calais and her partner, or assistant, I'm not really sure what to call this guy, and I say guy because this mechanical robot that gives off some real Giscard from the cover of Robots and Empire vibes has Lee Pace's voice. So I guess that's one way they can keep him involved now that there's no more Brother Days. That, and I think the rogue line that was started by Sereth and Dawn last season is still out there. That's still something that they can pull up later when they want to bring Lee Pace back. This is a very brief, mysterious scene, which is consistent with the previous season's endings. When Calais notices the signal, she says, "Interesting, one of us is seeking a clasp," and from Trantor no less. The us here could be referring to their kind, one of us, as in a robot. But in the response, Lee Pace Robot says we were told Demerzel was incapable of clasping. The use of we there makes it sound like the collective us, similar to the way Calais answered Harry's skin in the game question, because we can't. This also makes it sound like Demerzel is an outsider if they've been told something about her rather than knowing. And for what it's worth, Calais does say she was incapable of clasping, which I imagine is a direct result of Cleon's chip. She says the signal isn't coming from Demerzel, which isn't a surprise since we know it's coming from the Brazen Head, and wonders if someone is seeking to embroil them in the struggle. The mechanical robot interprets that as meaning that someone has succeeded, and Calais delivers the last line of season 3, indicating that if a robot had succeeded, then all the pieces are in place. From there we get a flyaway shot that reveals their base is on our moon, which I've already mentioned. The season then closes on a shot of Earth, which, if you remember back to season 1 in the conversation between Salvor and her dad, is merely a mythical place where humanity might have originated. Demerzel mentions Earth as her origin planet, and we've seen our solar system on the outside of her toolbox, but average people can't even say for sure if that's where humanity started. I can't say for sure, but I think the planet looks different. You can see the Americas, and there isn't that much green to indicate vegetation that you would see in photographs from space, which might hint at desertification. So it's definitely a to be continued rather than a conclusive ending, but it is a good one, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.